Are you struggling with a long-standing conflict between you and a coworker? You're going to want to watch this video. Welcome to the Pollack Peacebuilding YouTube channel, where we provide valuable tips and strategies to help you prevent and resolve conflicts at work more effectively. I'm Jeremy Pollack, and in this video, I'm going to discuss the single most important element, in my opinion, in all of coworker conflict resolution. Before we get started, if you're interested in online conflict resolution and de-escalation training, check out our online training academy at peacefulleadersacademy.com. There are lots of little conflicts that can happen in our work relationships, a lot of them being operational or logistical or short little disagreements, and these can generally be worked out, for the most part, between people on their own. But then there's a whole category of conflicts, the kind that we typically get called in to help resolve, that are more long-standing relationship-based conflicts, where it might feel like there's communication style differences or personality clash, or people just generally aren't trusting or liking each other. And to start resolving this type of conflict, I'm going to talk about one of the most important, if not the most important elements. Now, I want to highlight a caveat here. Relational conflicts are not the same as serious workplace violations like sexual harassment or bullying or illegal behavior. That's different, and what I'm about to go over does not apply to those situations. Again, it applies to relation-based conflict, which includes long-standing communication style differences, causing resentment, frustration, and maybe generally disliking someone. I will say, I acknowledge that every relationship has a unique dynamic, and every conflict has particular elements that need to be addressed and solved. There's no blanket conflict resolution strategy that's going to apply to all scenarios. But there is one fundamental concept that I suggest underlies all social or relationship conflict, and which, in that case, must be a starting point for resolving conflict in any relationship. And that foundational concept is what I'm going to address in this video. So, first things first. What do I mean by relationship? The way I'm defining relationship is the interpersonal dynamic between any two or more individuals who interact. That means you have relationships with your neighbor, with your coworkers, even a stranger on the street with whom you interact. These are all just different types of relationships, but there's still an interaction, an interpersonal relating or socialization between two or more people. In other words, a relationship in this context doesn't refer necessarily to just a long-term committed relationship. I want to paint a picture here that any relationship is like a house. All relationships, no matter the type we're talking about, like all houses, need a strong foundation in order to stay standing upright in one piece. If we don't have a strong foundation, or if the foundation is cracked, or there's no foundation laid at all, then our house is going to be unstable, and it's essentially a house of cards. In this case, any type of tension, any little tremor or mini earthquake or windstorm, any natural, normal tension that arises in the environment is likely to damage the house, if not completely destroy it. And the bigger the storm or the quake, the more severe and long-lasting the damage is going to be. That's why it's so important that all of our houses have foundations, that we maintain those foundations, and that we repair them as necessary as they get wear and tear from the very natural, normal tensions that arise in the world. Similarly, all of our relationships need strong foundations in order not to crumble at the first sign of conflict or tension. So when it comes to relationships, what's the foundation I'm talking about? What's this strong but flexible material that can protect our relationships from becoming severely or permanently damaged due to tension or conflict? What's the foundation that needs to be repaired if it gets cracked, or laid down in the first place if we notice it doesn't exist? The foundation of any relationship is a feeling, and that feeling is mutual care. In other words, the feeling of care for the other person and the feeling of being cared for by them. And the level and intensity of care as the foundational material in a relationship will depend, of course, on the particular type of relationship. Obviously, I'm going to care for my spouse a lot more deeply and differently than I do for a complete stranger whom I just met. But nonetheless, in order for any sort of tension or conflict not to completely erupt into chaos, I still need to feel some level of care for each person, even if it's just fundamental human being to human being level of care. Now, let me talk about the feeling of care just in general. Like any feeling, care doesn't require practice. It may require intention, reminding, focus, but it's not something that most of us need to learn or skill build around or practice. For example, if you put everything aside and felt motivated to care for someone, just focus on caring for a sick relative, let's say, you probably know exactly what to do. You know what care feels and looks like just intuitively. You would just need to have the intention and motivation to be caring. So it doesn't require practice. Care also doesn't require time. We might think that we just start to naturally care about someone once we get to know them and like them and develop a strong relationship with them. And that may be true, that care naturally develops over time, But it's not true that it necessarily takes time, that it requires time. Care is a feeling, and that feeling is a choice in every moment. You could go out on the street right now, find a complete stranger, and if you were motivated, you could choose to feel caring for them, and you'd know exactly what that feels like without any time or practice. Again, you just have to be motivated to manifest that feeling. Care also doesn't require friendship or some sort of personal investment in the relationship. There are lots of people that I care about whom I'm not friends with. I have clients that I deeply care about, and I'm not their friend. I have moments and interactions with total strangers about whom I can choose to deeply care about in that moment, even though I'll never see them again. And that feeling of spontaneous care leads me to show up in a different way in that interaction, in that very temporary relationship than I would otherwise. In some relationships, care feels more natural or unconscious, and in others, it has to be more deliberate. And even with my close relationships, when a conflict arises, I have to be very deliberate and intentional about feeling mutual care, reminding myself that I care for this person and that they care about me despite the current tension between us. Friendships, marriages, close work relationships, these are all forms of interpersonal patterns that require consistency over time. Care, on the other hand, is a feeling, and it's a choice that you can make at every moment. It typically accompanies these longer form types of relationships, but it doesn't require those types of relationships. All that care requires is a choice to focus on feeling caring in any moment for any person anywhere. That being said, I don't have to constantly focus on care. Just like if I'm living in my house and I'm going about my day, I don't have to constantly focus and think about the foundation of my house. But the moment an earthquake or even a tremor comes, I better immediately refocus on my foundation to ensure it's strong and stable. Similarly, in any of your relationships, whether it's with your neighbor, your coworker, your family, etc., and there's no conflict or tension, you can just kind of go about your day, you can do your work, and get things done without having to focus much on this feeling of mutual care. But the moment there's a conflict, the question becomes, where does your mind go? Do you focus on your foundation? Do you go back to a place of care for this person? If you don't, the likelihood of that relationship crumbling becomes much higher. Again, depending on the severity of the conflict and the current strength of your relationship foundation. In other words, the likelihood of you destroying that relationship, wanting to simply be done with it, avoid the person, fire them, get rid of them, leave the department or the company altogether, all of these options become more likely when there's no foundation of care. On the contrary, think about a time when you got into an argument with someone who you did or do deeply care about. Family member, a friend, a loved one. What are the feelings that come up for you when you argue with someone that you really do care about? You probably feel extreme uneasiness, distress, maybe even sensations of sickness, nausea. Not just because of the argument itself, but because you don't want to be in this sort of conflict with someone that you actually care about. This type of interpersonal conflict creates a massive internal or psychological conflict in you. Here you are, angry or hurt by someone who you simultaneously care about. This creates a real cognitive dissonance that leads to very high stress. Now, the foundation of care and the resulting internal conflict hopefully then highly motivates you to resolve the conflict as quickly as you can, both because you want to relieve the tension of this internal psychological stress and you want to get back to fulfilling that deep need you have for mutual care with this individual. We all have this deep need to be cared about by the people around us, especially those whom we actually feel caring towards. This is why it's so important to have a strong foundation of care in relationships. When conflicts arise, if you don't focus on care, you probably go straight into defensiveness, dismissing the other person's perspective, wanting to prove that you're right and they're wrong, and so on. But if in the moment you feel conflict or tension with someone, you immediately remind yourself, wait a minute, I have to remember I actually care about this person. Or wait a minute, let me just feel caring towards this person for just a second or two before I jump all over them. If you focus on that care, that foundation, you have a much greater likelihood of showing up in a more productive way to solve the conflict. And remember, the good news is that no one has to teach you how to care because all of us who have normal functioning brains naturally knows what it feels like to care and to be cared for. For me, care feels like getting someone's back, knowing I'm here to help them, to make them win, to support them, to protect them. It may show up like that for you, or care could manifest in a different way for you. But I'm sure that you know what it feels like to care for someone. Now, we also need to feel cared for by the other, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. But for now, let's focus on what we can control, our feeling of care. Turning to our workplace relationships, when it comes to your coworkers, you might think to yourself, why do I have to care about someone at work? I don't need to be friends with them. I just want to come to work and do my job. Can't we all just be professionals here? And the answer is yes, you can be. And no, you do not have to be friends with people at work. But remember, care doesn't require friendship. Care is a feeling that you can choose to feel at any moment towards anyone. Just because you care about someone doesn't mean you have to be friends with them. You might show up in a more friendly way with that person when you feel caring, but you don't have to establish a relational pattern that would indicate that you're friends, for instance. So why should you care? Why should you choose to feel caring for people you work with? Remember, if the foundation of any relationship is weak or absent, just like that house, then the moment any tension or conflict arises, that relationship is going to crumble. If you have no care in the relationship, or if you once cared but forgot what it feels like to care for this person, or if you've never cared for that person and you never felt cared for by them, then again, you have no foundation in this relationship. A house without a foundation isn't going to last very long because natural, normal wear and tear, tension and conflict, they're gonna happen. You need to establish a strong foundation in order for you to get through the conflict, in order for you to repair or stabilize the house. Now, what if you feel that mutual care isn't possible, that even though you might try to care about them, they just don't care about you? Well, here's what I'm going to propose. If you're up for this idea of changing the paradigm of this relationship, of building a foundation or rebuilding it, then I suggest you write an email to this individual, include a link to this video, and write a few short sentences, something like, "Hey John, I just watched this video and found it really interesting. I would be up for practicing this concept with you if you're interested. What do you think?" And if you feel comfortable doing it in person or on the phone, even better. You could say, "Hey, I just watched this video. I thought it was really interesting and could maybe help us. I'd be up for practicing the concept if you would be too. What do you think?" Now, I can hear some of you feeling really resistant to this concept. I know it's super hard to feel caring for someone that you've had issues with for a long time. Over time, when conflicts go unresolved or get worse, we develop biases and perceptions about people that are super hard to break. So you're probably saying, "No, this won't work for me. My situation's too far gone. There's no way I could feel caring for this person or that they could care for me." But I think you can. I know that caring is a choice. Maybe an uncomfortable choice, but it's still a choice. So my question to you is, do you have any interest in this situation getting better? You may not believe it can, and maybe it can't, but I bet if you set a foundation, if you choose to care human being to human being, you will show up differently. You will feel differently. Isn't it worth trying just for the distant possibility that you relieve some of this stress you're feeling at work, some of the tension among your team? If it's worth even trying, why not choose to do something different? And let me tell you, I've seen coworkers who deeply believe that mutual care is not possible, and they eventually learn to care for each other, improve their relationship, and relieve the stress and tension of conflict at work because they chose to do so. Now, I'm not saying that solving this problem over the long term is going to be super easy or take no effort. I'm not saying that all your conflicts will go away with just a simple choice of feeling care, but the way you show up in this dynamic, the space from which you think about solutions, the space within which you talk to this individual while trying to resolve some of the tension, this will completely shift if you come from a place of care, from a feeling of care. If you build a strong foundation under the house of this relationship, something will change in the dynamic. So choose to care, make that choice, and you really should have fewer relation-based conflicts that are long-lasting. At the end of the day, if you try and you have no luck and you need help, I'll throw in a plug for us. My company, Pollack Peacebuilding, specializes in coworker relational conflict. We'd love to help your team get along better, and you can get in touch with us at pollackpeacebuilding.com. And you can also check out our online workplace conflict resolution courses at peacefulleadersacademy.com. That being said, I highly encourage you to try this on your own first to see if you can make a choice to care for the other, to see if you could ask them if they'd be willing to care about you and create a strong foundation from which to start rebuilding this relationship, this trust. I hope this video is helpful, and I wish you the best of luck and peace in all of your relationships.